This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. 48 hours ago, I told you there was going to be a day of reckoning in Alabama. Well, there sure was. And this is not the way the president thought his day would go. It was supposed to be a big Republican victory in Alabama's Senate race, a victory made possible when the president threw his support to Roy Moore, who, it bears repeating, is an accused child molester. You know how that worked. A big victory for Democrat Doug Jones, and a humiliating defeat for Moore, for the president, and for the brutal and cynical worldview of Steve Bannon, a man described this way by Republican Congressman Peter King.
This guy does not belong on the national stage. He looks like some disheveled drunk that wandered onto the political stage.
A lot of lessons there for anybody who thought President Trump had rewritten the rules of American politics. His election may have been more about the man than the movement, a movement that may turn out to be not so much grassroots as astroturf, smoke and mirrors. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Turns out voters, even in a Republican stronghold like Alabama, are not in lockstep with this president. His approval rating, just 48% there in a state that he carried by almost 28 points just a year ago. Turns out that the man who, as a candidate famously said, this.
I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters.
Well, that man can't stand on the border of Florida and Alabama and swing an election. The laws of the political universe still apply, and betting on voters who swept Donald Trump into office was a bad bet for Roy Moore. But there's more to all of this. The group of voters who may be the key to Doug Jones' victory in Alabama, African American women. A stunning 98% of black women who voted in this election cast their ballots for Jones. President Barack Obama only got 95% in 2012. The gender gap overall worked in favor of Jones, women voting for the Democrat with a margin of 57 to 41%. Young voters also favored Jones. Voters aged 18 to 44 went for Jones 61 to 38%. But what does this all mean for the president and his agenda? Well, if Alabama is any indication, President Trump and his party may be on a long, rocky road. Let's discuss now. CNN political commentator David Swerdlick is here. Political analyst April Ryan is here as well, and Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of The Hill. Thank you all for joining us. Good evening. Post-election eve, right? Bob, President Trump trying to turn the page after suffering a humiliating loss. He is 0 for 2 in Alabama. Here's the president today.
A lot of Republicans feel differently. They're very happy with the way it turned out. But I would have, as the leader of the party, I would have liked to have had the seat. I want to endorse the people that are running.
So President Trump went all in for Roy Moore. Is the president weaker today than he was yesterday, Bob?
I think he is, Don. I mean, he backed Strange in the primary, lost it. This is a state he won big time. And then, of course, Doug Jones won. I mean, this is one of the most stunning elections that we're going to see in our lifetime. The situations where some Republicans were actually rooting for a Democrat, I think like Mitch McConnell, we're never going to see again. So I think this hurts his agenda in one big way. Obamacare replacement legislation. They almost got it through the Senate. They didn't. And Doug Jones is going to be around next year. I think Obamacare, the law, I mean, it's been very resilient. It's been criticized repeatedly. It's been legally challenged. It's been legislatively challenged. I think Obamacare is going to be around for a while.
Even with the mandate in the tax, with them wanting to get rid of the
administratively and the tax bill, they can chip away at it, but actually replacing it on a big level that they wanted to do earlier this summer, no chance.
Just completely getting rid of it. Okay, April, let's move on. Roy Moore, I mean, he really had a laundry list of problems. Let's be honest here. He was a flawed candidate. But this loss was in Alabama where, you should be able to run anyone with an R in front of their name. The president is trying to minimize the defeat. But what does this say about his political strength, you think?
The president's political strength was, I guess you would say, it leaned on Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon was somewhat of a crutch here. And I guess that crutch is broken because the president is weakened. This was not a good moment for the president. Alabama, the reddest of red states, I mean blood red, bright red. And they could not win the state. And the president, supported someone else, yes, but he ultimately fell in line with Steve Bannon, who thought he was a kingmaker. And, it's really interesting, and I thought about what you just said at the beginning. You were talking about numbers. And I just think about and how women voted for the other candidate, for Doug Jones. And I think about how the president had 51% of white women in his corner, particularly those who married white women. 51% of married white women were in his corner, voted for the president. And look at how women voted overwhelmingly for the Democrat. And I'm thinking about those women who voted for the president. They voted for their husband's interests, according to Gloria Steinem. And now, with what happened in Alabama, that still has high numbers in popularity for the president, they totally turned tide and went in the opposite direction. This is a moment that it's going to be a marker for this president, a huge marker.
I want to ask you, David, because in the beginning I said pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, and you get what that was, right? That was a reference to the Wizard of Oz,
Steve
where
Bannon,
and Steve Bannon, where when they finally go behind the curtain and they see it's not a god back there, it's just this one guy with a megaphone or a microphone, a green screen, and some levers. And so people have been putting too much stock, too much faith, saying that Steve Bannon is this Svengali when maybe he isn't really.
So, Don, I don't think Bannon is going anywhere. He will regroup and try to make his mark in 2018 in an assortment of races around the country. But yes, last night in Alabama, he was repudiated, and his approach of trying to upend the Republican Party and the whole political system really suffered a setback because by not going with the establishment candidate, Luther Strange, Republicans coughed up a seat to Democrats in the reddest of red states. Politics is a game ultimately of addition, not subtraction. It's a cliche, but it's true. If you have both houses of Congress and the White House, as Republicans do, and you're trying to march forward with an agenda piece by piece, regardless of what people think of that agenda, what you want to do is build seats, not turn over the wheelbarrow and try and destroy the establishment. You're trying to march forward to a goal. And Bannon, with this weird brew of, it's not conservatism, it's this hodgepodge of statism and protectionism and anti-immigration nationalism and anti-establishmentarianism, even though he went to Harvard and he worked for Goldman Sachs. And whatever he's trying to sell, it's not as easy as he probably has thought it was coming out of the victory of President Trump a year ago.
Hey, Bob, I want to ask you this. I thought it was very interesting that Ari Fleischer tweeted this. You remember he was this White House spokesperson under President Bush. He said, establishment candidate Ed Gillespie lost. Non-establishment candidate Roy Moore lost. The lesson? A base-only POTUS isn't enough for the GOP to win. D's hate Trump more than R's love him. POTUS needs to increase his approval rating, or D turnout will kill R's in 2018. I mean, Bob, how many times have people on this program and other programs and political commentators and strategists, how many times have they said the exact same thing? But yet this administration and this president doesn't seem to listen. He keeps going back to the base because he needs those cheerleaders. He needs that ego boost.
Well, I mean, we do have to think also that they haven't gotten much done legislatively. They don't have a big bill win. They didn't get health care done. They haven't got transportation done. I think they're going to get this tax cut bill done. But at the same time, is that going to really get him to 50%? No. I think the White House has to think, let's get to 50%. And on Bannon, I think, how is he going to raise money after this massive loss? I think a lot of Republican incumbents who are up for re-election, who were nervous about Bannon a couple days ago, they're not so nervous anymore because Bannon's going to have a fundraising issue.
Do you want, Bob, do you want the president campaigning with you in 2018?
I think you want him in primaries. I'm not so sure in the general. I mean, Barbara Comstock, who lives out by me in Virginia, I mean, I don't think she's going to have Trump in her district because Trump is unpopular. I think it depends on the situation. But in primaries that are upcoming in the early part of the year, you probably want Trump. General election, not so much.
April, what do you think? Do you think that Republican candidates in 2018, you think they're going to be energized? Will that energize the Democrats if the president is campaigning with them?
Of course, it'll energize Democrats, but I'm thinking of Republicans. 2018 is right here.
Yeah.
And you have to think about this. It all depends on the time and what's going on. If things continue to steadily go in a downward path, I don't believe you're going to get many people wanting the president. But of course, you're going to have those areas that are solid Trump areas that there may be a call for him. But I don't believe if this president continues to go down this path, and if he does not have the legislative win, a legislative win that he's hoping for, people may take a second thought and really rethink bringing him on the campaign trail.
Let's talk about his approval rating, David. Job approval rating, 32%, and that's according to a Monmouth University poll. That's the same as a Pew poll last week. And by the way, President George W. Bush didn't hit numbers like this until well into his presidency during the Iraq War. How do numbers like that impact the president's deal-making abilities? I mean, to April's point just a second ago.
Exactly, 32%. The highest number you see out there is the Gallup Daily at 36, but that's the most, right? So what you have with Alabama last night, with the repudiation by the Alabama voters, even though it was fairly narrow, even though Roy Moore was a terrible candidate, and with these approval numbers that are stuck in the mid to low 30s, you have Republican candidates next year, like Bob and April said, and also Republicans already on the Hill who can make their own decision about whether they're going along with the president in a primary or on a given issue. They may go with him in some cases, but they don't have to be afraid of bucking the president.
Is that a serious consideration right now, David? You think people are wondering, oh boy, what do we do? Do you think candidates, lawmakers who are up in 2018 are really thinking about should they go along with this president's agenda? Should they have him on the campaign trail? Should they sign on with this?
Okay, I agree with Bob. They may want him in a primary and maybe not in a general, but the point is, with the president this week, with his coattails so short, they can make their own decision. They don't have to live in fear of going, crossways or sideways with the president. They can make their decision based on what they think the demographics of their district and the issues that are near and dear to their district matters, not so much staying right on track with President Trump, because President Trump has wounded himself over the last year. And they know it, voters know it, the White House knows it.
Self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. April, stick around, please, because when we come back, I want to talk about how black voters, especially black women, made the difference in the Doug Jones' stunning election win. We'll be right back.